video contains a ton of information about Walt Disney World's Skyliner transportation system. For your convenience, I've organized this into 4 different categories with links down below in the description to make it easier for you to jump back and forth between the sections that you need. Section 1 covers general information and frequently asked questions. Everyone should watch Section 1 because it has all the basic general information you've been wanting. In Section 2, we'll cover everything you need to know for families traveling with strollers. Section 3 is for ECVs and wheelchairs. And finally, in Section 4, we will address cognitive and sensory concerns such as epilepsy, autism, motion sickness, and claustrophobia. Let's jump right into it and get started with Section 1, General Information and Frequently Asked Questions. Welcome to Section 1, General Information and Frequently Asked Questions about the Walt Disney World Skyliner Transportation System. Walt Disney's Skyliner Transportation System had its opening day to the general public on Sunday, September 29th, 2019. The Skyliner features over 300 gondolas throughout the entire system. There are stations just outside of Epcot at the International Gateway, which is the side entrance to Epcot. There's another station just outside of Hollywood Studios, and there are Skyliner stations on the edge of the Caribbean Beach Resort property and right in between Pop Century and Art of Animation. There is one additional Skyliner station that is not currently in operation. You do pass through it, but you don't actually stop. Although you can pass through this station, you will not disembark or reboard there. It's at the Riviera Resort. That resort is still under construction and will not have full service until that hotel opens. The gondolas travel at about 11 miles per hour, and there are windows at the top of all 4 walls of the gondola. There's even a special forced air system that pushes air from outside up through the floor of the gondola. That 11 mile per hour speed helps push that air through the gondola. So although there are no fans and no air conditioning on the gondola, it's still cool, breezy, and comfortable. From time to time, the gondolas will stop in place along the line, and sometimes you'll sit for a few moments inside the gondola station, but it never gets oppressively hot. There's just enough movement of air and just enough windows to keep it pretty cool in there. Each Skyliner station has 2 platforms. There's a standard platform where the gondolas come into the station and slow down. In fact, the gondolas slow down so much that you're actually able to walk onto them. The gondolas never stop. They just go very, very slowly. The floor of the gondola and the platform are even with each other, and every single gondola has a built-in gap cover. So this gap cover extends from the gondola to the platform and covers the gap between the two. That makes it super easy to walk on and off of the gondola. If you're using a mobility device or you have mobility concerns that will prevent you from being able to step onto a moving gondola, you can load from the accessible platform. But there's more information about that in Section 3. Make sure you use that link down below to jump there if you need to. But first, here's a little bit more information about the gondola system. Gondolas can sit up to 10 passengers. But on opening day, I witnessed they were seating about 6 to 8 passengers per gondola. In most cases, only 1 stroller was allowed per gondola, sometimes 2. But we'll discuss that more in the stroller section coming up next. All passengers must remain seated throughout the entire flight. Once you've reached the station and the doors of your gondola have opened, wait for your cast member to give you the sign to stand up and walk off. On opening day, I noticed that the lines for the standard loading platform for the gondola system were really long, but they moved very quickly. New gondolas arrive at the Skyliner station every 10 seconds. They usually have about 4 gondolas loading at any given time from the standard boarding area. 2 additional gondolas can load from the accessible platform, but again, we'll talk about that more in the wheelchair section. Many of the gondolas have decorative wraps that feature Disney characters. There are 22 different designs in all, but not all of the gondolas have these wraps. I did notice that the gondolas that had the wraps on them had a slightly obscured view. but you still could see plenty. The gondolas that didn't have the wraps had much better views. But all of the gondolas have almost floor-to-ceiling views on all 4 walls of the cabin. It's pretty spectacular. At nighttime, you should still get some amazing views outside of the gondola, even if they have wraps on them. In the evenings, when it's dark out, there is a little bit of subtle lighting inside the gondola along the perimeter of the floor, and that's to help you see when you're getting on and off the gondola. Operating hours for the gondola system vary from day to day depending on what time Epcot and Hollywood Studios open and if there are any special events going on like extra magic hours in the morning or in the evening. Make sure you check with your cast members or ask at your Disney hotel or even call Walt Disney World Guest Services for additional details on Skyliner operation hours on the days of your visit. Many people have asked me if you need a ticket to get on the Skyliner or if you have to have a ticket to the parks or even be staying in a resort in order to ride the Skyliner system. And the answer is no. You don't need a ticket to the parks, you don't need to be staying in a hotel, and there are no security or bag checks to get on the Skyliner systems. So the Skyliner operates very much like the Walt Disney World bus systems or the monorail system. Those don't require park tickets or hotel stays either. Oh, and another question that people secretly asked me, are there restrooms? Yes. Each of the Skyliner stations has restrooms in them or located nearby. If you need a restroom and you don't see a sign for one, make sure you ask a cast member. They'll direct you to the nearest restroom. Now that you've watched section 1, you can jump ahead to one of the other sections that meet your needs. Up next is section 2, Strollers. Welcome to section 2 of the Walt Disney World Skyliner Transportation Information video. This section is for families traveling with strollers. At the time of the recording of this video, early October 2019, Walt Disney World does not have a written guideline regarding strollers for the Skyliner system. However, I did a great deal of research. I read a lot of blogs, I watched a lot of vlogs, and I reached out to Walt Disney World. I wrote emails, I had Twitter conversations, and I called guest relations a number of times. Plus I also visited the Skyliner and rode it throughout the day and went on 8 different gondolas throughout 4 different stations. But I didn't stop there. I reached out to thousands of families who use strollers on the Skyliner system and got their take on what it was like. Now here's what I can tell you for sure. The Skyliner system has signage that says all mobility devices, including strollers, must be 30 inches or less in width and 48 inches or less in length. So your stroller must fit within a 30 by 48 inch footprint. The doors to the gondolas can accommodate strollers that are 30 inches or less in width, and that's why they ask that. And the 48-inch length leaves room enough in the gondola cabin for other passengers. I've also learned that generally they only allow 1 stroller per gondola. However, if there are 2 umbrella strollers in your party, there is a chance they may let both of you on. And I actually heard of one case where they had 1 single standard size stroller and an umbrella stroller both on the same gondola. If your family is traveling with more than 1 stroller, be prepared that they might split your party apart and put them on 2 separate gondolas. I did learn that when they split your party apart, they try to put you on gondolas that are next to one another so that you board and exit at roughly the same time and you don't lose track of your party. Here is the big question you've all been wanting the answer to. Can I roll my stroller onto a gondola? And the answer is maybe. After surveying thousands of families, I learned the following. 100% of the families that used umbrella strollers were allowed to roll their strollers onto the gondola. One particular family felt more comfortable folding their stroller up, so they did, but Had they wanted to, they could have rolled their stroller directly on. Families using single-seated standard strollers were asked to fold up their strollers about 50% of the time. In some cases, it was because another stroller, like an umbrella stroller, was on the gondola with them. In other cases, no specific reason was given. Families using double strollers reported over 90% of the time that they were asked to fold up their stroller. And that's even when their strollers were less than 30 inches wide and less than 48 inches long. I only heard of one family that was allowed to push their double stroller onto a gondola. So here's the takeaway. If you're using a stroller on the gondola system, I urge you to be prepared for the possibility that you may need to fold up your stroller. I did reach out to Walt Disney World through tweets, emails, and telephone calls, as well as conversations in person, and none of the cast members felt comfortable giving me any specifics as to why some families were allowed to roll their strollers on and why some were not. But based on the information I got from guests who use strollers on the gondola, I feel like it has something to do with the number of people in your party, the size of your stroller, and how many strollers are in your party. I get the impression that they leave it up to individual cast members to make the decision about whether or not a family needs to fold up their stroller. One thing Walt Disney World was very clear about is strollers that are medical devices. If your child is using a specially equipped handicapped stroller, please make sure you take that stroller to the accessible platform. If there is any medical reason why your child cannot be removed from their stroller, you want to make sure you let a cast member know that you need to use the accessible platform. Now, please keep in mind that medical strollers, medical device strollers, have a very particular look to them. They are very different looking from your standard stroller. So if you have a standard stroller and your child does not have any medical need to stay in their stroller, please do not try to use the accessible platform for convenience. The accessible platform should be reserved for people who truly need it. I do have a few tips from families who use strollers on the Skyliner to help make your transition on and off the gondola easier if you are asked to fold your stroller up. Make sure you don't have any loose articles on your stroller. Make sure all the articles on your stroller are inside of bags that are easy to pull off the stroller in a hurry. I thought this was kind of a genius tip. Families who seem to handle the transition of folding strollers up assign family members different duties as far as the stroller is concerned. For instance, one family member may be responsible for grabbing the bags off the stroller. Another family member may be responsible for hanging on to the kids. And a third family member may be responsible for folding up the stroller and transporting it on and off the Skyliner. I hope this information and the tips will help you have a wonderful trip with your family using your stroller on the Skyliner system. If you found this information helpful, please make sure you click the like button so that YouTube will be prompted to share this information with other families like yours. And if you know anyone who could benefit from this information, make sure you share this video with them. There are links down below that you can copy and paste to share with your family and friends. It's time to move on to section 3, wheelchairs and ECVs. Welcome to Section 3 of the Pammie Plus Parks Walt Disney World Skyliner Transportation System information video. This section is for people using wheelchairs, ECVs, and other mobility devices. This section is also for people who have any mobility concerns whatsoever. The big question I've been getting is, are there accessible gondolas? And the answer is absolutely. In fact, all 300 gondolas on the entire Skyliner system have the exact same dimensions, and they all have doorways that will accommodate mobility devices that are 30 inches or less in width and 48 inches or less in length. There are several gondolas that are specifically considered accessible gondolas, but any gondola can come off the line and load at the special accessible platform. The difference between a standard gondola and an accessible gondola are wheel chucks. The accessible gondolas are equipped with rubber wedges called wheel chucks, And those wheel chucks are placed behind the wheels of your ECV or wheelchair to give it a little additional stability. I visited the Skyliner transportation system on opening day, and we boarded and exited 8 different gondolas. We boarded and exited them all at the accessible platform. 4 of the gondolas that we rode on were specifically designated accessible gondolas that had the wheel chucks. And 4 of the gondolas that we rode on were just regular gondolas that did not have wheel chucks. So half the time I had chucks under my wheels and half of the time I did not.
Right this way?
Thank you.
Enjoy your flight.
Thanks.
Tell you, I can't really tell the difference between whether or not they were underneath my wheels or not. My ride was just as stable and just as comfortable, whether they were under my wheels or they weren't. Let me tell you a little bit more about this accessible platform. It has its own entrance, and if you can't find the entrance, just ask any cast member anywhere near you and they'll direct you. So your entrance is different than the standard entrance. The line for the accessible platform will usually be a lot shorter than the standard platform. However, because they give you all the time that you need to board and exit, and you have to wait a few minutes for your gondola to rejoin the line, the process of boarding is a lot slower. I would say on average, our wait to board a gondola was about 5 to 15 minutes, depending on how many people were in line ahead of us. I'm guessing the average amount of time that each party takes to board a gondola from the accessible platform is right around 8 minutes. That's what it was for us on opening day. It may be different on the day that you go, depending on how long the line is. The wonderful thing about the accessible platform is that the gondolas come to a complete stop. At the standard platform, the gondolas slow down when they come into the station, and they slow down so slowly that most people can walk directly onto the gondola. However, it's not quite slow enough for somebody who maybe has mobility concerns or balance concerns, is using a cane, a walker, a knee scooter, an ECV, or a wheelchair. If you or any member of your party has any of these concerns, ask to use the accessible platform. The gondolas come into the station, break off of the line on a separate track, slow down, and come to a complete stop in front of the loading platform. Each Skyliner station can load 2 accessible gondolas at a time. And believe me, they give you all the time you need to get onto that vehicle or all the time you need to get off.
All right, here we go.
If you're using a standard wheelchair, a member of your party will push you onto the gondola first. You'll put the brakes on, and they may also put some wheel chucks behind your wheels. And at that point, if you are able and you wish to transfer to the bench, you may do so. I rented an ECV on this day, and I drove my ECV directly on to the gondola. And the ECV that I ordered was the standard ECV that you can get from many different outside companies. I drove on very, very slowly and glided in to a stop. There is a metal bar around the edge of the floor on the gondola so that your ECV won't go any further. It kind of stops your ECV in place. At that point, I turned off the ignition and removed the key. And at that point, they told me that if I wanted to, I could transfer from the ECV onto the bench, but I chose not to. My chair was really comfortable, so I just stayed in it. I also want to share some information about strollers and ECVs on the accessible gondolas. I noticed that if you had a really large or oversized stroller, you know, like a double stroller or a really, really big single-seater stroller. They were asking families to split apart and have the family member who is in the wheelchair or ECV go on the gondola at the accessible platform, and then they took the rest of the family along with the oversized stroller over to the standard platform and put them on the next available gondola so that the gondolas would be close to one another. So they did split up parties when the stroller was very, very large. However, with smaller strollers, they allowed one smaller stroller to go on with a wheelchair ECV, but that stroller had to be folded up in order to make enough room for people to go onto the gondola with the ECV or wheelchair. When there's a wheelchair or ECV on a gondola, they will only let up to 6 people in the gondola, including the person who's in the mobility device. Let me talk to you a little bit about what it's like to get off of the gondola in an ECV. We waited until we came into the station, arrived at the platform, came to a complete stop, then the doors open, and at that point a cast member steps on and lets you know that it's safe to put your key back into the ECV and turn on the ignition. All the other passengers in the gondola with you, once they are safely out of the way, the cast member will remove the wheel chucks from your wheels if there are chucks there, and then you can begin to slowly back out. If you're in a standard wheelchair, a member of your party can back you out for you so that you don't have to do it yourself. But if you're in the ECV, you need to be able to back that up yourself, or you can transfer out of it and have a member of your party back it out for you. But cast members are not allowed to back that ECV out for you. You or a member of your party have to do it. Don't fret about this too much, because when you drive onto the ECV, you have to have your handlebars straight and everything's in place and you're already lined up. All you need to do when you back up is keep those handlebars straight and very slowly back out at your own pace. I found it to be very easy and I had no issues with it. Hang onto those handlebars, keep them straight, and back out nice and slow. You won't have any problems at all. The cast members actually gave me verbal cues to let me know that I was doing okay. That made me feel extra safe. I hope you found the information in this section of the video very helpful. Please hit that like button if you enjoyed it and you found it useful. And make sure that you share this information with your family and friends. Remember, there are links down below in the description that you can copy and paste and share with other people. Also, if you're interested in helping to support the channel to ensure that I can continue to make content like this for you, please check the description down below for a list of different ways that you can support PammiePlusParks.com and Pammie Plus Parks here on YouTube. Up next, Section 4, Cognitive and Sensory Concerns. Welcome to Section 4, Cognitive and Sensory Concerns, including information about motion sickness, fear of heights, and claustrophobia. I am on the high-functioning end of the autism spectrum, and I have some auditory concerns that trigger mild to moderate anxiety. I also have some challenges with being in enclosed spaces, especially when there are a lot of other people in that enclosed space with me. From an autism perspective and somebody who has auditory concerns, I was worried about the sound of rushing air in the cabin, and I was worried about being in the cabin with a number of other people. I was really nervous that being in a confined space with a lot of voices and the sound of the air outside might trigger some anxiety for me. Because I was in an ECV and loading from the accessible platform, loaded into gondolas by ourselves because the other parties in line with us were also in ECVs or wheelchairs or had walkers or other mobility devices that took up space in the cabin. So I didn't have to worry about other people's voices and sounds that they might be making. I mean, I love children, but one of the things I feared the most was being on a gondola for a long period of time with a child who might be screaming or crying or making a lot of repetitive noises that could trigger anxiety for me, and I did not experience that. I think that if you do have autism and you do have some auditory issues, it's worth asking a cast member if they'd be willing to have you load from the accessible platform and allow you to just be seated in a gondola with just the members of your party. Disney will do whatever they can to make you feel as comfortable and as safe as possible. And I think if you're reasonable with your request and you ask politely rather than demand, I think that they're going to be able to help you with that. Just be honest and share what your concerns are, and they're going to do what they can to help you. Now, even when there aren't a bunch of people with me in a small space, I can still feel a little bit claustrophobic. So yeah, I was a little bit concerned about some of the trips being like 11 or 12 minutes long on certain sections of the line and being in this basically egg hanging from a wire in the sky. Well, you basically get a floor to ceiling view through all 4 walls of the cabin, with the exception of where the bench is. And because I could see so much outside, it actually was really peaceful and relaxing. Being able to see a huge vista all around me didn't make me feel like I was in a capsule. The gondolas really aren't much bigger than a freight elevator would be, yet they felt so much more spacious because you could see so much outside. I found that a huge relief, and it took away any fears or anxieties I had about feeling claustrophobic. The gondolas have tinting in them, so the light in there isn't too bright. There's no strobing light or anything like that. I think his experience may be different at night because you can see outside and you can see the lights around and all the parks and cars going by on the road, but there's no flashing or strobing light from inside the cabins that I know of. From what I understand, in the evenings, there is just a strip of light that goes around the bottom perimeter of the floor so that there's just enough light to illuminate the floor so you can get on and off the gondola with ease. But otherwise, there's no other lighting inside the gondola to cause distraction or to cause any issues with photosensitivity. One of the things we noticed before we got on is that when the gondolas come into the station, they're coming in pretty fast, and they kind of come in at a slight angle, but then they balance out very quickly. And the same thing happens when the gondolas are leaving the station. They come out so fast that they kind of tilt a little bit with the speed, and then they very quickly balance out. Woo! Oh, wow, this thing's it's so fast. I think being able to see exactly where you're going and what's happening in front of you makes it a little bit easier to deal with any motion sickness you may have. I will tell you though that there are warning signs for the Skyliner that say that if you do have motion sickness, you shouldn't ride. And I think you should take that into account. If you normally have a significant amount of motion sickness on most rides, and most attractions and most forms of transportation, you should probably consider not riding this. I really feel like if you've been on the Kilimanjaro safari ride, if you've been on Soarin', if you've been on Peter Pan, if you've ridden the Magic Flying Carpets, if you've been on the People Mover, those are some of the combined sensations that you have on the gondola system. And if you can ride all of those rides and not have any motion sickness whatsoever, I think you're gonna be fine on the Skyliner system. I found it to be very mild and gentle, but you know, you gotta look out for yourself, and if you think you have pretty significant motion sickness, I would just avoid the Skyliner system, because maybe the sensation of the air rushing through the cabin, being able to see everything down below, and knowing that the cabin may shift a little bit forward or back upon entry and launch, that might be a bit much for you. Take all of those things into consideration when you're making your decision. Well, that does it. All 4 sections. And don't go away yet, because I've picked out some more videos for you to enjoy. Until we get to meet again, remember, life is a roller coaster. Enjoy the ride.